And my presentation is squarely focused on the people of the social dimension, which we call as inclusivity. So in some sense saying that can really organizations do something about the poor? And as you know, and today I see a lot of foreign participants in the audience, that India does have a poverty problem. I mean, we have a billion plus population, and different kind of estimates say that maybe about 500, 600 million people survive by consuming only less than 20 rupees a day. And so that's a very big issue that all of us need to grapple with. So my presentation is focused on that. And I hope that most of you actually have probably heard about this book called Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, known about Professor C.K. Prahlad, who said that, and this is started coming off as a working paper in the internet since 1997-98. The book probably came out around 2004. And he was saying that there is a huge market to be tapped at the bottom of the pyramid. And that's how he was inspiring multinational enterprises. He was a consultant to very multinational enterprises all over the world. And since the multinational markets were plateauing out in developed countries such as United States and Europe, he was saying that, well, you guys should go to China and India and maybe parts of other places. But these typically countries have a lot of poor people, and there is a huge market to be tapped as far as these poor people are concerned. So go there and make money. And somewhere he tried to convince people that it is possible to be both profitable and serve the needs of the poor. So that's the whole hypothesis. Now, my purpose here is to just review what we have learned maybe 15 years after he put up that hypothesis. And I am not going to paint a very nice picture here. The debate, can the needs of the poor be managed in a financially sustainable manner? That is the question. And I see some of my students in the audience, so they would have seen this slide. They know that I love this particular diagram. But this comes from a transient critique of C.K. Prahlad, who also happens to be his colleague, apparently in the same corridor, Professor Anil Karnani, who paid a glowing tribute to C.K. Prahlad, saying that Prahlad's claims can at best be either a harmless illusion or a dangerous delusion, because first of all, Prahlad doesn't know how to add his sense of numbers, which probably is acceptable for a professor in management. But the other thing is, he says, you just can't make money out there for the poor. And the crux of his argument, which he later on explained in a couple of other papers, was he says that, look, there are certain, quickly if you look at the slide, what it is typically saying is that there are certain goods and services which when at a certain level of production, the profitability dimension of the organization as well as the social good dimension are perfectly aligned. That's the left-hand part, which is the zone of opportunity. And so think about a scenario where a cell phone company keeps on reducing the price of the handsets, and as a result, a lot of poor people start using it. So you would have heard of these nice, heartwarming stories of a fisherman in Kerala, using this cell phone to know the price of fish, or an auto rickshaw driver in Bangalore using the cell phone to talk to his customers. And Karnani was saying that, look, these are certainly not examples of helping the poor, because helping the poor in this particular case is just a collateral or an incidental event. And I think many of you can even apply this principle to a lot of these environmental discussions which we had since morning, since afternoon. I mean, if by creating a nice building or a green building, you actually save a lot of money, business sense would tell you, please do it. I mean, that's not a big deal. But the trade-off, and that's the trade-off that he was talking about later on, and he says that the trade-off would be that can you do something which is environmentally conscious but which actually reduces your profitability? That's the zone of trade-off, right? If McDonald's reduces the price of the burgers, and as a result, a lot of poor people can eat it, I mean, that's no big deal because that's just market expansion. But will McDonald's cook the burgers in olive oil compared to the fat that we use? Because that's when actually the price will go up. That's the zone of trade-off. And Karnani's argument was that organizations, by definition, will never do that. Because organizations need to maximize shareholders' wealth. And hence, it is unthinkable to expect an organization to think so much about society in the zones of trade-off. So that's what his fundamental argument is. So when we look at a lot of this work which organizations have been doing, the challenge before us, or challenge before any organization, is to say that, well, if I see a trade-off between maximizing the social good versus my profitability, which means that I am either in a zone of trade-off or zone of disaster, what can I do to push it to the zone of opportunity? Right? Because if I am a commercial, profitable enterprise, then you can't expect them to do something for the society if it comes and adversely impacts their profitability. Right? Shiv has already left, but remember, towards the end, he made a very interesting statement. He said that those villages where the cost of access is very high, we don't go there. That's what he said, right? Some of you asked the question that what is the reach? So ITC will have to calculate. They will have to calculate because they cannot disappoint their shareholders, and hence they will only do all this great initiative. I think e-shopper is a fantastic initiative, but they will do it so longer. There is marginal benefit out of that. Right? You are not supposed to do something for the society at the cost of profitability. That's a fundamental difference between a commercial enterprise and a social enterprise. So now what I am trying to do here is, based on a little bit of experience, I worked in this field and that little bit of consulting, trying to pick up a few learnings from the field, which were not so apparent when Prahlad was making his argument or somebody else. And these are some of the stuff which I would quickly go through. One is the whole thing about pricing. Now, one of the critical arguments of Prahlad was that the poor actually pay a poverty premium. So his argument was that typically a poor goes to the market and buys in small quantities, and that small quantity actually is much expensive than when we buy in larger quantities, which means a sachet of shampoo is much more expensive if you multiply it compared to 1 liter of shampoo, right? So hence he was saying that, look, there's an opportunity out there. So it's simply a cash flow problem. But this is a very recent study which came out in Harvard Business Review, and thanks to these two researchers, Kay and Livingston, who actually went and started measuring it, and they were comparing prices that the poor are going to pay in Dharavi versus what rich people pay in Warden Road. And Warden Road and Dharavi is the largest slum in Asia, if not in the world. India competes on every parameter to be best in the world, and we also have those kind of distinctions. Whereas Warden Road is one of those upmarket locations in Mumbai. And if you see those numbers, these are all in dollars. Obviously, I'm not going to discuss the units here and there, but you will find that the poor are actually really paying a huge discount. So they are getting goods and services far cheaper than rich. Now, what does it mean for us? It means that for a regular organization, if you want to sell to the poor, lo and behold, you will never be able to compete. Because why is it that the poor are getting prices so less? Simply because, one, there is a cost-quality trade-off. There are also lesser overheads for these companies. Many of them actually do illegal practices. They are able to operate from premises which probably are not even safe. And hence they are able to cut down costs dramatically and supply these. Whereas if you are a commercial enterprise, you will not be able to do that. And hence the pricing is a huge issue. If you go and compete on those markets, you are going to lose your shirt. You will never be able to make it financially viable. The second problem is the distribution problem. And here I have a graph, so just bear with me. Okay? Now, what it does actually is shows that several initiatives by large companies, if you look at PUR, water purification, it's by Procter and Gamble. Sole, it is by, I'm forgetting, okay, Shakti is Hindustan Unilever, and all of these are products targeted at the BOP, but it had to be withdrawn simply because they were not profitable. Either people were not buying it at those prices, or even if they give a price which the people can buy, it was actually creating losses for the companies. So many of the companies actually went back. If at all they wanted to continue it, they would continue it more as a CSR initiative rather than a profitable business initiative. Now, why does this happen? This happens because of a very peculiar nature of the poor markets, that they are clusters. Right? There are clusters, but there is huge gap between clusters. Now, if you are running an ordinary business, a regular business, you will find that this is kind of the, this is a very simple curve. Revenue goes up with units sold. But your cost curve, because you typically get economy of scale, this is the expected cost curve. So which means what? That as you sell more units, you make more profit. But this is not how the cost curve seems to be working in the BOP markets. What exactly is happening? Apart from the fact that there is a higher initial cost curves start moving up dramatically after a certain level. Imagine that you are selling, solar lamps in a location in a Karnataka, a few cluster villages, you are going and selling it, now you want to scale. And now if you want to scale, you don't want to come and sell it in Bangalore, you want to go to another village, and that village is probably 20 miles away or 50 miles away. Suddenly your distribution costs shoot up, and that's the reason why this curve goes up. So what you can do at a small scale, if you want to replicate it in a larger scale, suddenly your costs go haywire, which means these economies of scale are shooting up, are coming up much more rapidly compared to a regular business, right? Which naturally creates a problem for us. So I hope we explained. Now the third interesting thing is how big is the market really for the poor? Okay, so now till now I have talked about products being sold to the poor. Now the other way to look at it is, can you use the poor as producers, right? And that's another interesting way of helping them. And to some extent what ITC is doing is that, using the poor as the producers, they also want to sell to the poor. And in our country we have two great examples of initiatives that are massively scaled using the poor as a producer. One is the Amul and the other is Fab India. Fab India involved with craft. For those out of India, outside India, and the spinning, these others are all familiar with that. The third picture I have picked up is from initiative by Reliance Industries, who are trying to fix the back-end supply chain of fruits and vegetables to be sold in Reliance Fresh. So now all of these companies are working at the back-end supply chain to source farm-based products, dairy products, or even craft-based products. But the big question is that, how big is the market? Now today you will find plenty of initiatives, especially I have been seeing it in the last 2-3 years for non-farm products. People would come and say, well, I will go to the village, I will source a lot of craft-based product, and then I will come and link them to the market, come and sell to the cities. I mean, it's a wonderful initiative. School kids are doing this. But the point is, if you want to suddenly scale it up, then you land up into a problem. How many Fab Indias can we support in this country? How many Fab Indias and the Mother Earth and some other institutes can a Bangalore market hold? First of all, we don't even have the data. So all of these actually will tell you that it is nice to do things in a very small scale. Moment to pick it up, moment you want to increase the scale, then you come and hit real barriers. It took a long time to build the kind of brand which Amul is, which Fab India is. If Reliance is doing it, they already have an existing brand, they are doing that, but it is very difficult to be done by somebody who is starting a new initiative. So so I talked about the pricing issue, I talked about the distribution issue, now I am talking about simply the demand issue. That for certain kind of products, we don't even know whether the demand exists or not. All of these obviously leads to a scaling issue. There is no page down, probably this is an indication I should stop. Okay, right? Now, there is another very interesting thing that's happened, that even when you start scaling, you start adopting management principles, and as a result, you become more profit-oriented and dilute the social dimension, and which is what we call mission dilution. And the biggest example in our own country is the microfinance industry, where the moment the for-profit fund managers started coming and advising you that what you should do and what you should not do, you have tremendous pressure to scale. And as you start scaling, typically what happens is you go after low-hanging fruits. If you go after low-hanging fruits over a period of time, obviously you switch over to being very commercially oriented rather than very socially oriented, because at that point of time, the trade-offs that you make becomes more on the economic side. So for those of you again out of the country, let me tell you that what happens in the microfinance industry was that because they were chasing clients again and again, typically multiple microfinance agencies started going and lending to one particular poor person. So there were instances when one poor person was borrowing from 6 or 7 microfinance agencies. So effectively, they were borrowing from X and giving it to Y, borrowing from Z and again passing on the money, till one day they would run out of options and they would go to the money lender. And unfortunately, this money lender fellow will not allow you to go. So either he will kill you or he will encourage you to commit suicide, whichever way the more dignified you have your choice of that. Right? So that obviously had a lot of repercussions on the microfinance industry, but in general, you won't be surprised if this comes and hits in many other industries, that is mission dilution as you move around. So my fifth and the last issue is that, because and somebody talked about this early also, that there is also this entire thing about being looked upon as a social enterprise. I mean, it has suddenly reached a very faddish proportion, where every organization comes and says, I want to do nice to the society, and what we are doing is helping the poor, etc. Obviously, there are vested interests, because there is a branding issue which comes in. There is also, you have this breed of investors who are, as ruthless investors as you can think of, but they have suddenly started calling them as impact investors. Because they were saying, okay, we will go and fund companies which help the poor. Why are they funding companies which help the poor? It's a smart hedging strategy for them. If you do portfolio management, they will say that, these are some of the companies which will give very low returns, but at the same time the risk is very low. But they would come and masquerade themselves as impact investors. Then of course, me and my colleagues, this represents a nice area for academicians that come and go and publish. The most ridiculous thing I have heard about till date is a professor in some country I won't name, who says nano is a base of the pyramid product. Right? And he actually published a paper in Strategic Management Journal, which is the #1 journal in the world, by saying how nano is the base of the pyramid product. Right? So the term itself is now getting bandied around to advantages. Media, of course, gets plenty of eyeball when you think of social enterprises, and rhetorics of consultants, which is always there. Now, what this typically does, why should we even bother about that, is that for genuine companies, this is taking away resources. Right? So, when we were talking about a fund granting agency, they are saying that we are today so apprehensive that there are non-genuine people coming into this sector, that obviously our evaluation process has grown much stricter. We are spending a lot more time to understand which for an economist is increase in transaction costs. Even a public policy maker is very worried, saying that, well, I know there are a few people who are genuinely interested, but then there are hundreds of others who want to exploit this space, and hence how do I select one from the other? How do I make sure that even in a sector like healthcare, I make especially helpful policies for hospitals which are genuinely addressing the needs of the poor, and distinguish them from the corporate hospitals who are just masquerading as something socially useful, right? So I would kind of summarize by saying that financial viability of business models that sell to the BOP are a suspect. I told you pricing is a problem, distribution is a problem. The social dimension of organizations that involve the BOP as producers is difficult to establish. And a lot of people, even mining companies today, are going and claiming that they are social enterprises because they have created jobs, right? And you can judge, how socially motivated they are. Today, no template has emerged on how to scale a social enterprise without subordinating its primary mission. So this is kind of work to be done. That's something which has not emerged yet. Large commercial enterprises are yet to make much impact in this case. They are doing good work in terms of CSR. They are saying, okay, I'm making profit, I'm putting some amount of profit to the poor. That's fine. But to actually create a viable business model so that you are helping the poor, it's a big suspect, right? We still haven't even seen numbers of ITC as far as each offer is concerned. So those are the areas which we are talking about. And of course, there is a need for academic research in the area of social enterprise rather than social entrepreneurship, which means too much focus has been given on entrepreneurship. We are still struggling to understand what is a social enterprise. How do we grow this entrepreneurial venture into something which can be there for a sustainable for a longer time? So after 15 years, this is my assessment, that it is still an opportunity rather than a reality. Of course, I don't want to be very pessimistic, so we are very hopeful, but at the same time, we don't see a lot of examples where we can be confident that you can indeed balance sustainability and profitability. Thank you. I will next invite my colleague, the Ministry of